Well, the New Age movement, the problem with it is it's like a buffet. There's no such thing as the New Age movement. Every New Ager believes something different because it's a buffet. You can just pick here, pick there, and pick a little here, little there, whatever you like to put together. So it's a mishmash of Hinduism, Buddhism, Wicca, Taoism, paganism, you know, and just flat superstition. It's just this huge mishmash of all this different kind of stuff. And, you know, as we're going to see, there's just so much out there. If you go to a bookstore, and every large bookstore, the bookstores that are remaining anyway, out there you go, and there's always a spirituality section, or sometimes you'll just call it a New Age section. And if you pick up one book and you pick up another of the best-selling New Age books, one will say one thing, one will say completely the other thing, right? But neither one of them are Christian. So there is not a New Age movement teaching. Like I said, many just take a bit here and there. Now, sometimes they do work together. This was, I think, the funniest thing. Many New Agers came together in 1987 for what they called the Great Harmonic Convergence. In August of 1987, a bunch of the New Age leaders were sold that the Mayan calendar, which we all remember how that figured was supposed to be, the world was supposed to end in 2012, but you know, that nothing happened there. Well, 1987, they all get together, and all these New Agers get together in places of power. So they go to Sedona, right? Sedona is a big one. If you've ever been to Sedona, you can't find a rock on a trail anywhere because New Agers steal them and they take them home. So they go to Sedona. They went to Santa Fe. They went to Stonehenge, right? They go to all these different places and they do their thing, whatever their thing is. Some chanted, some did yoga, some just sang, some who knows what they did, right? They got together and they said something spectacular was going to happen. It was going to change the world, and nothing happened. Absolutely nothing happened. I mean, they did it for like they even stayed for like an extra day. It's like, maybe we just need to give it a little push, little push, little push. Nothing happened. So typically they don't do anything together. When they do get together, it's been pretty disastrous. The New Age movement really began to become popular in the 1960s. Thanks to the Beatles. Some of you are old enough to remember when the Beatles decided to, become enlightened, right? With the Maharishi. They decided to go over and seek out the teachings of the Maharishi, and that kind of introduced New Age, Eastern Guruism, all that kind of stuff into the West because everybody was crazy about the Beatles. They followed everything that they did. That and the musical Hair had a big impact. Remember, it was going to be the age of Aquarius, right? The age of Aquarius. Do you know what that means? What is the age of Aquarius? Anyone? They believe, this is from astrology, and it basically, the age of Aquarius, they said, they believe that in the 60s that the stars were lined up to become the age of Aquarius, and beginning in the 60s onward, you would have a generation of peace and love. How'd that work out? Ask the victims of the Manson family how they felt about the age of Aquarius, right? But all this really came when this began to hit, when the Beatles brought over kind of the gurus from the East and Hair began to explode, all kind of stuff. College students began to run to their professors who were more than happy to engage in all this nonsense. And they recommended the writings of a lady named Alice Bailey. Alice Bailey is really probably the most influential person in the New Age movement. Bailey was British, born in Britain in 1880. She came to America to write and teach in 1907. She died in 1949. And she wrote, I have no idea how she wrote so many books. Like, Stephen King writes like 2 books a year. She was just cranking out. She cranked out like 25 books in like 3 years or something ridiculous like that. She was just going crazy, producing book after book after book after book. Alice Bailey's library is it's huge. And she claimed that she was receiving revelation through telepathy from a guru somewhere in Tibet. And this guy was just sending her thoughts through energy mentally, and she was just writing them down. She was just the scribe. Now, you think about this. This is a pretty good way to con people, right? Because if you're just writing the stuff down, somebody asks you a question you can't answer, well, I'm just writing it down, right? If you're challenged, you're like, well, you know, I'll try to get back to you after I channel my guru, you know, in Tibet. It's a pretty good way to insulate yourself, which is what she did. But she really immersed herself in what's called theosophy. Theosophy is very important to the New Age movement. This is the idea of secret, hidden knowledge. That there's secret knowledge out there that if you just know how to get to it, it will be revealed to you. So some people think this can happen through transcendental meditation. Others think it through reading secret pagan writings. Others think it's just the different occult practices. Some think yoga. You know, these are ways to get to this secret hidden knowledge that's out there, right? That's theosophy. And that's a big, big deal in the New Age movement. Today, when you look at the New Age movement, you see guys like Deepak Chopra, James Redfield, Rhonda Byrne, Eckhart Tolle. These are some of the leading writers. If you've ever read these, but some of these books have just sold an amazing number of copies. Rhonda Byrne's The Secret sold 19 million copies. 19 million copies. James Redfield's The Celestine Prophecy sold something like 14 million. And I read The Celestine Prophecy back because it was, if you remember in the early 90s, it was like in the front of every bookstore everywhere, right? And so I picked it up because somebody had mentioned it to me. Somebody asked me what I thought of it. I was like, I don't know what this thing is. And I was an atheist at the time. I read the thing. It's a novel, actually. And it's a really poorly written novel. And it's basically, the novel is just a guise to hide the fact that this guy is discovering that there is no such thing as coincidence. All things work together. And if you really want to understand things, you have to get in line with the secret hidden knowledge that he has found, which is basically Tibetan kind of Buddhism. That's the Celestine Prophecy. I'll save you the whatever 99 cents to download it on your Kindle. At the end, spoiler alert, everything's connected, right? I mean, that's the Celestine Prophecy. Rhonda Byrne's The Secret. Like I said, that's probably been the bestseller. Rhonda Byrne, this is what really disturbs me, because The Secret was sold in Christian bookstores. Because Rhonda Byrne claimed to be a Christian. And so The Secret, I saw this everywhere, and at first I was like, what is this? And so finally, I picked it up and I started to read it. I got about halfway through it. It's one of the few books I've ever wanted to punch. If I could take a book out into a back alley, I would take this book out. I mean, it's just, I started reading that this is the dumbest thing I have ever read in my life. And basically the whole thing was because she also believes that everything is connected. She believes in what's called monism. We'll see this in a minute. And what Byrne basically believes is what's called the law of attraction. The secret hidden knowledge she's uncovered is the law of attraction. Is that whatever vibes you're sending out, you're attracting similar vibes. So if you're an angry person, you'll attract angry people in angry situations. If you're a loving person, which of course this is the secret, if you're a loving, nice person, you'll just draw and attract loving, nice people in loving, nice situations. It's basically kind of like the power of positive thinking, right? That's exactly. It's the same thing Norman Vincent Peale tried to sell in the 1950s. It's the power of positive thinking. The problem with that is this is all just nonsense, right? I mean, that's just absolute nonsense. It's true that if you walk around and you're always grumpy and loud and so forth, most people are not going to want to be around you. That is true. That's not a secret, that's common sense. Right? And if you're nice, people want to be around you, right? This is why everyone loves Ralph Clay. Right? I mean, it's just, that's not a secret, Rhonda, you know? But it's just not true. I mean, do bad things happen to good people with good attitudes? Of course they do. It happens all the time. You can put out good vibes and good thoughts all you want. And still, one day, you're going to get very sick and die. Right? These things are going to happen. But for some reason, she was able to sell 19 million copies. Eckhart Tolle was really dangerous because Eckhart Tolle also claims to be a Christian and also claims to be very well educated. He claims that he was educated at Cambridge. When people say they're educated at Cambridge, Oxford, or Harvard, but they don't list the degree, be wary. I mean, apparently you can get away with walking into the library and opening a book at Cambridge, walking away and saying, I was educated at Cambridge. Because he basically audited a class there and then claimed to be, this scholar from Cambridge. And he has no idea what he's talking about. And basically, he tried to rewrite the Bible so that, all paths lead to Jesus, through Jesus, everybody's saved. And he converted Oprah Winfrey to this and all this other kind of nonsense. It's just all this stuff. I was talking about this with somebody Friday who loved Deepak Chopra. I said, the funny thing is if you look through Deepak Chopra's books, because it's all basically, Near Eastern kind of stuff. I said, if you look through all his books, what's the foundation of all this knowledge? Nothing. Just his opinion, right? It's basically, I just feel like, And he claims the title of guru, and we go, oh, okay. And we listen, but you'd be better off listening to your drunk uncle at Thanksgiving. I mean, it's just as much, there's just as much foundation there, historical and logical foundation as there is to Deepak Chopra, but he's made millions off of it. So all these writers have fairly different views. They usually push one kind of way to this secret knowledge, and of course they're the only ones who have it, and of course you have to buy their book to get it. They're not giving it away for free for some reason, right? All these writers have fairly different views, but there are a number of underlying assumptions. One is pantheism. Pantheism is basically God is everything. God is you. God is this computer, right? God is your Honda. God is, everything. Even Donald Trump's hair, that's God. This is God. Everything just makes up God. Everything is God. This is pantheism. The other one is the power of thought. A lot of them talk about the power of thought, that we all just have this power within us, and if we just send our thoughts, we have this power. Because everything is connected, everything in the universe is connected, we can just channel our thoughts, we can change things, we can influence things. One of my favorite live albums of all time is Neil Young's Live Rust. And there's this part where a rainstorm is coming, they're playing outside, and Neil Young starts screaming, maybe if we all get together and say, no rain, no rain, no rain, the rain will go away. And suddenly the song ends because the rain didn't go away. If the power of thought all collectively could do this, we would not have these constant ice storms and stuff in southern Ohio, would we, right? Maybe the teachers are out there all praying together, but all of us would agree it wouldn't happen on the weekends, for goodness sakes. And the other thing they all seem to agree on is moral relativism, which is there is no objective truth, there is no right or wrong, it's all opinion. It's just all opinion. Now, bless their hearts, I always get these young atheists on my blog who think they know so much because they listen to one atheist speak and then they just turn around and repeat it. And somebody commented on my blog this week, saying this, there is no such thing as objective truth. To which, of course, I responded, is that true? Because if that's, if you're right, you're wrong. Because if you say there is no objective truth, that's an objective truth, therefore objective truth exists, and you're wrong. Right? He's making a truth claim. You can't escape it. You know what I mean? This is just silly. I mean, it's just logically incoherent. When people say there is no such thing as truth, they might as well be saying, there's such thing as square circles. They are just speaking, it's just total, drives me crazy. Anyway. So, these teachings simply cannot be squared with biblical Christianity. The Bible teaches that God is separate from his creation. God is not his creation. God made it, and it is separate. He stands away from it. He is a separate person. Does it make sense? All right? And that we are free creatures under a sovereign God, and truth comes from God. Because God is all-knowing, all-powerful, if he says it, that's truth, that's right, that is good. It comes from God. Make sense? Because you get this. Well, you know, we're not saying, I've had others say, I had a professor in seminary say, Randy Harris used to say, well, yeah, of course there is objective truth, but we can't know it because we're subjective creatures. And I was like, but God's not a subjective creature. He's objective. He's right. He's pure. He can see everything. And so if he says it, that's objective truth. Well, but we have to interpret it. Okay, there's no other way to the Father except through Jesus. What other interpretation can you come up with other than there's no way to the Father except through Jesus? Right? That's like saying, go to the end of the road, turn right. What did he mean left? No. It's straightforward, dummy. You know? This is not something you have to interpret and therefore we don't know if it's right or wrong. Of course we know. I mean, it's just silly. It's just absolutely silly. So you need to just, avoid those writers. They're on talk shows all the time. Oprah used to have them on big time. Oprah loved them, but now Oprah's she's yesterday's news. Now it's all Ellen, and Ellen would rather have Justin Timberlake, so that's fine. Whatever. Where things are really dangerous, when you're looking at the New Age movement, I'm not so much worried about some of those writers, though the secret bothered me because, and Eckhart Tolle bothers me, but what I'm really bothered about is the number of occult practices that are widely adopted by the New Age, that have infiltrated the culture to the point where they have been, kind of embraced by a number of people in the church. And there are a lot of them out there. Now, I'm going to sound like a killjoy when I go through these. I understand, like, oh, what's the big deal? And for most of you, it isn't. But for some people, it is. Let's start with this one. Astrology. Astrology is very popular, not always taken seriously. You've probably looked at your horoscope and been like, okay, whatever, But there are a lot of people who take it very seriously. There's a woman at the gym I work out with, and she claims to be a Christian, and she is a diehard believer in astrology. Absolutely diehard, And what I'm here to tell you is, sorry, it may make you mad, but there's one, nothing to it, and two, it's completely unchristian. It comes from ancient pagan religions. In Babylon, what they did was when they began to study the stars, they noticed the kind of orderly pattern in which they traveled, and so they began to worship them as gods, and they began to give the planets and stars divinity. That's where this is based on. And each god, each symbol of the zodiac, basically rules over a certain area of life. And if you're born under when that one is ruling, when that one is on a certain position, then that determines your character and so forth and all that kind of stuff. So this is all basically, again, in the pagan belief of monism, that everything is connected. And some people go so far as not just to read their horoscope, some people pay for chart readings, right? Pay a lot of money for chart readings. And what are they looking for? They're looking for secret knowledge, right? They're looking for insight into their life and the future. Now, what I'm going to argue is this. Astrology is forbidden in the Old and New Testament. Absolutely forbidden. God says no. And the reason he says no is because God says in the Bible, trust me with your life and your future. What you're trying to do, for people who really believe in this stuff, what they're trying to do is to control their future. And what God says is, that's mine. You belong to me. That's mine. Trust me. Right? I've said this before. You can argue the central question in all of Scripture, from Genesis 2 to Revelation 19 or so before the end of Jesus returns, the central question is God looking at humanity going, will you trust me? Will you trust me? Adam and Eve, I'm going to put you here. You got your garden, you got your garden, name your animals, blah, 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 blah. Don't eat that tree. Do you trust me? Right? Also, again and again and again. Moses, take them, do this. Will you trust me? Will you trust me? Again and again, the question is, will you trust me? When we do these things, because I understand the future's scary, right? Being out of control is scary. All of us, like, we were in my wife and I were in Huntington last Sunday when the snow started to come down, right? Went to lunch and a movie, and we were driving back, and it was really coming down. And, so we're driving along the road, and there were a couple times we kind of did a little dance, in the car, because one time a deer was about ready to jet out in front of me, so I had to brake and all that kind of stuff. And every time you feel your car going a little bit out of control, you start to really exercise your sphincter muscle, don't you? That's that. That's that fear of not being in control, right? Because most of the time, if you're sliding a little bit in your car, you don't wreck. 99.9% of the time, you don't hit anything. You just kind of remember, whoa, okay. But that for a moment, you're going, right? It just happens, and it's that fear of losing control. We like to be in control. Here's the problem: if you're a Christian, you're in the car with God. He likes to drive. All right? You may get shotgun, you ain't getting the driver's seat. And so you need to remember that. So all this hunting for secret knowledge, all this kind of stuff, it's an attempt to either look for mysticism and answers outside of Scripture or to control things. And God has said, the Bible is where you go for truth, and I'm in control, and you just need to trust me. Does that make sense? That's probably the biggest difference between us and people who engage in the New Age movement, or should be. Same thing with palm reading. Also forbidden in Scripture. Palm reading is interesting because we don't even know really where it came from. Historians cannot agree where palm reading popped up from. We think it was a Hindu practice that was popularized by gypsies.
Some early entrepreneur.
Yeah. And, yeah. It's the same thing with tarot cards. Tarot cards originally were playing cards. Tarot was a game. It was considered a harmless game. It was created in the Middle Ages, and in the Middle Ages, before printing came along, cards were hand-painted, right? And so every deck was different. And so that's kind of where they started coming up. They started to play the game. Well, at some point, again, we think gypsies, again, are the ones who helped popularize this. Gypsy fortune tellers selling palm reading and tarot card readings to make their living. Now, the problem is with this is, I'm going to hold off in a second, but you can go down a really dark alley here. It can sound, I know people have had their palm read for fun, all other kind of stuff. I've met those people. I've never done it because I'm not going to spend that money. That's just ridiculous to me. But anyway, I do this, even when I was an atheist, I was like, oh, give me a break. Why would I want to spend that money on that? And so, but all this kind of stuff basically still comes back to divination, trying to uncover the future, all this hidden knowledge, all this other kind of stuff. And again, Scripture condemns it. Leviticus 19:26. You can't do this. You need to trust God. Sorry to be a killjoy, but that's the way it is. Now we'll come back to kind of the dark side of this in a minute. What about karma? I hear Christians use this term all the time, right? Well, it's karma. Karma will get you, blah, blah, blah. First of all, that's not karma. The way I hear Christians use karma is more from, my name is Earl, not from the real meaning of karma. Earl had this, that I'm going to do all these good things, and all these good things are going to happen to me. That's how we tend to use it. Or vice versa. If you do bad things will happen to you. That's the secret from Rhonda Byrne. That's not karma. Karma is a Hindu concept tied only to reincarnation. Karma is the idea that if you do a lot of good things in your life, when you're reincarnated, you'll have a better life. That's karma. Karma is not, if I do good now, good will come to me. If I do bad, bad will come to me. That's not karma. A Hindu would look at you and go, what? He would do the Princess Bride thing. You're using that word. I don't think you know what it means, right? That's not karma. Karma has to do with reincarnation. And Christians do not believe in reincarnation. And we're going to talk about death here in a minute. What happens to a person when they die, whether they're in Christ or outside Christ. We're going to talk about that in a second. But the Bible leaves no wiggle room for reincarnation. And it's weird to have this idea that when I hear New Age people say, well, if you just do good, good will happen to you. If you do bad, bad. How do you define good and bad when you don't believe in right and wrong? Isn't that a little weird? What sense does that make? They don't believe in right and wrong, so what's good or bad? I might like to torture cats. That's my idea of good. Because I believe cats are evil. And on that, I'm right. There we go. Folks, I'm telling you right now, when you get to the throne room of God, if God has pets, they will be like Rottweilers. Satan has cats. Oh, yeah. I've said this before. You need to understand something because this is very important. There is a difference between cat theology and dog theology. Dog theology is they look at their owner and say, wow, this person takes care of me, this person feeds me, this person pets me. He must be God. A cat says, this person feeds me, takes care of me, therefore I am God. All right, let's see how many other people I can tick off. What about yoga? What about yoga? All right, well, let's get this straight. I like the little origami thing she did there. My wife does all these things. I have no idea how she does them either. There is certainly nothing wrong with stretching. I stretch before I work out. I stretch after I work out, right? And apparently, because my right leg's been sore all week, I don't do it enough. So stretching is good. Deep breathing is good. But the problem is, here's what we think. If you go to a yoga class, you may be under the impression that every movement you make has been designed by some fitness expert to stretch a certain muscle. That is not true. A lot of yoga moves are actually based upon the way you're supposed to worship certain Hindu gods. Did you know that? Certain yoga poses have nothing to do with stretching certain muscles. It's the way you're supposed to worship certain Hindu gods. It's a pagan worship practice. That's the hidden little secret about yoga. Like again, I have nothing wrong with people going to some class where they stretch for an hour and all that stuff. That's good. That's good for you. It's good for your lower back. It's good for you. Fantastic. Good for you. All right? And I remember there used to be a guy who taught yoga on TV on, I think it was called Oxygen Channel or something like that. And he used to basically just kid around, all kind of stuff, and they played like old Stevie Wonder and stuff like that, and they do their stretches. Okay, so what? Who cares? But then if you go to other places, they'll get heavy into like the yoga philosophy, which is all Hindu. It's all Hindu. It's all based on karma and so forth, and then you get into all this kind of Eastern nonsense about your chakras and your energy centers and so forth. That's pseudoscience. There is no science to back up any of that nonsense. You do not have energy centers, you have organs. Right? You do not have chakras. All right? You do not have an aura. You may have a smell, but you do not have an aura. It's all pseudoscientific nonsense. So when I started really starting to get workout and all kinds of stuff, I went online. I started to say, well, do I need to do yoga? Because I thought maybe that's why I needed to make sure I don't get muscle strains and so forth. And I ran into a lot of fitness experts who knew what they were talking about, saying, you can do yoga if you want, but you're better off just doing the stretches they taught you in gym class when you were in junior high. And remember that the goal of yoga and the philosophy is to attain oneness with the gods, plural, and yourself. Sound Christian? Nope. What about ghost hunting, seances, and Ouija boards? These are really popular. You go into New Age bookstores, there's always Ouija boards. There's always some advertisement for a seance. There used to be a professor at Shawnee State who offered seances every once in a while in downtown. He's still there. I think he doesn't do that anymore, but anyway. Probably because nothing happened. Now, here's where we get into this stuff. Now, I understand, look, one of my guilty pleasures, as my wife knows, and sometimes she shares it, are these stupid cable TV shows about ghost encounters and ghost hunting and all the other kind of stuff. We binge watched one Sunday when Ghosts Attack, was that what it was called? And it's just such corny fun. You can't help but to sit there and, you know, and so, you know, I understand watching that, even though, I mean, I don't understand why people watch Ghost Hunters, because it's the same show every week. I feel cold. Exactly, close the door. You're in a broken down insane asylum in December and you're in the basement. Yeah, it's cold, dude. That's not a spirit. That's just the atmosphere, right? I mean, that's just weather. My favorite one was that their big revelation. I remember they advertised it and they were like, you know, this is big. We have, you know, and so the guy is sitting there and they're calling out to the ghost, as someone is here, make your presence known. And someone threw a hanger at them. What ghost throws a hanger? What was the ghost of Liberace or Mommy Dearest? I mean, what in the world? You know, who throws a hanger? I mean, it's just the dumbest thing. All right, so I understand all that, but here's the thing. It's true there are ghosts in the Bible. We see, remember, what's the famous Old Testament one, right? You go back to Samuel and you see Saul goes to the witch of Endor. No, he walks around, but he goes to the witch of Endor and goes there and then calls up the spirit of Samuel, right? And they can recognize him, right? And all that kind of stuff. And he comes up and he's kind of rather grumpy. He said, why you wake me up? Why are you bothering me for? Kind of thing. And so we see that, you know, that's a spirit that's been resurrected. Okay, we get that. Jesus teases with his disciples. Remember, he's walking on the water and they're looking at him and he goes, do you think I was a ghost? You know, and he says that rather tongue-in-cheek, by the way. He's not saying, you know, did you think I was a ghost? They're around here. Would you like to hear the stories? He doesn't do that. I mean, he said, do you think I was a ghost? You know, and so, but here's what we need to understand. Here's why I'm going to really caution you that if you want to watch the stupid shows, well, okay, whatever, but take it with a grain of salt and don't mess with this other stuff. The Bible teaches that, and Rick talked about this in his sermon. He's going to talk about it some more if you listen to the sermon today. So, Bible teaches that before the death and resurrection of Christ, all souls went to a place of the dead that they called Sheol. Okay, if you were good or bad, you went to a place of the dead. You did not go to heaven. You went to the place of the dead, because you cannot get to heaven without what? Without Jesus' death on the cross, right? Jesus has to die for your sins before you can get to heaven. So there was this place called Sheol. They called it Sheol. Now, in Sheol, there is paradise and there is Hades. This is what Jesus talked about, the parable of Lazarus and the rich man, right? They could see each other. But one was in comfort and one was in flames, right? They're in the place of the dead. And then, as Rick will point out this morning, you know, Rick asked a very good question in his sermon. Where did Jesus go after he died? He's gone for a while before he pops up. Where did he go? He went to Sheol. He went to the place of the dead. And he preached to them there, and he gave them what they needed, which was faith in him specifically, his blood atonement, his life imputed to them. He gives them that. He gives them what they need to get to heaven.
Was that only to the people in paradise?
Yes. This is what he tells the thief on the cross, right? What does he say? He does not say today we'll be together in heaven. No. He says together we will be together in paradise. And to Jews that meant the good part of Sheol, where the righteous went. People like Moses and Noah and David and so forth. They were all there, right? So, they all go there. When Jesus ascends, Rick's going to argue this, spoiler alert, sorry, Rick's going to argue this, I think he's right. I think they go with him to heaven. And Paul says to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. So if we die, our souls immediately go to heaven to be with Jesus. If you're not a Christian, if I'm reading Revelation and other places right, you don't go directly to hell, you go back to the place of the dead. Sheol, wait the day of judgment, final day of judgment. And then if you're unrighteous, you, Satan, and everybody else get kicked into hell. And hell is not a place where Satan rules, but is punished, by the way. Satan, the demons, and unrighteous get thrown into hell after judgment day. Believers who have been in heaven, or believers who are here when Jesus returns, then get their eternal glorified body like Jesus had, and we live here, new heavens and new earth, no evil and death, with God. Okay, now, so if you're unrighteous and you're going to Sheol, or if you're righteous, you're going right to heaven, where are ghosts coming from? Where are they coming from? Right? All right, so here's the problem. Scripture talks about this a little bit, and this is something that you need to know. I don't think it's possible for a soul to escape from the place of the dead. The only time we see it is with Samuel coming up, you know, and that was pretty much, the witch is surprised because she didn't think it was going to work. God did that, right? The witch probably about Peter Pants. And, you know, it's one of those things, oh, this works, you know, and God was behind that, right? And so there's no evidence that anybody can get out of the place of the dead without God doing it. And I don't think God gives weekend furloughs to go be ghosts, right? You've been good in the fire, you know, you want to go haunt somebody, yeah, go ahead, you know. He's not like Jim from The Office looking for a good prank, right? So that's not what's happening. So we got to take a look at this. If you look at 2 Corinthians 11, 14 through 15, Paul writes, "And no wonder, for even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. So it is no surprise if his servants also disguise themselves as servants of righteousness. Their end will correspond to their deed." It is very possible that when people encounter ghosts, and I understand, I'm not saying that people haven't seen things they can't explain, or there haven't been poltergeists, there haven't been, you know, all that other kind of stuff that happened. Remember the Amityville horror? They claimed all that stuff going on. I'm not saying that all that stuff is a hoax. What I'm saying is the Bible seems to say that there are no ghosts, but there are demons. And that demons disguise themselves as angels of light. So when you're messing around with ghost hunting, Ouija boards, seances, all that kind of stuff, you're not messing around with ghosts, you're messing around with demons. And even if there are ghosts, Paul is saying you don't know which are ghosts and which are demons, so you don't know. So one way or the other, you're at least risking messing around with the demonic. And folks, you don't want to do that. Right? Look, when we watch this show, When Ghosts Attack, and I was talking about these people, you know, and there's even one account in, I believe it's in Mansfield, Ohio, where a person claimed a ghost committed homicide, that there was an open elevator shaft and this guy was pushed down by this ghost that haunted this floor. I don't think that was a ghost. I think if that happened, that was a demon. What does, and Gospel of John 10:10 says, what do Satan and the demons do? They have come to kill and destroy. Right? So why would people say, oh, okay, if they're demons, then why why is it that some poltergeists seem harmless? Right? Well, you think about it. If a demon wants to take somebody from belief in Christianity into the occult, what better way than to appear friendly as an angel of light? Right? And drag you into that. So I'm just telling you, you need to be very, very, very careful with this stuff. Demon possession is very real. Now, missionaries in third world nations encounter it more than we do here. And I think there's a reason for that. The demons are very happy having us to lull into believe that that's all superstition and so forth, and we just stick with our scientific worldview. They're very happy with that. But in third world nations, it's more about spiritual power. And so, you know, demonic possession, is something that's very, very real. And there, of course, there are influences of demonic activity. Dad had an encounter very early on in his ministry here at the church with somebody who seems to have been possessed. And it was pretty scary. I've had instances where, well, I'll just tell you this. I'll tell you my spooky story. How's that? Should we lower the lights, Chris? No. When I was a 15-year-old runaway atheist who, in my dad's words, wasn't worth shooting, I went over to a girl's house because there was pretty girls there, and I liked pretty girls. And so I went over to this girl's house, and they were playing with a Ouija board. And they were sitting there doing this thing and said, "Oh, Matt's here. Do you want to talk to Matt?" I said, "No." Now, they didn't know much about me. They knew my name. They knew my friends. And that's about all they knew about me. "Do you want to know Matt?" "No." "Why?" "Nothing." "So are you afraid of Matt?" "No." "What are you afraid of?" D-A-D. That's when I was 15. Take that for what it is. Anyway, any questions about ghosts before we move on? Questions, comments?
You said that God says no as far as you talking about trusting in Him and not in what verse does He say no?
It's all through the Old Testament. I listed them back there, and it'll be up here. I got a list of a bunch of them there. Okay? All righty. Yeah, the question was, where are those verses about God commanding? It'll be in the PowerPoint. You can go online and you can look at all that kind of stuff. It's in Isaiah, it's in Leviticus, it's implied in Acts as well, Acts 2, other places. So, all right, cryptozoology. Cryptozoology is the search for undiscovered creatures like Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster. That Loch Ness Monster's kind of fallen off because they pretty much searched every square inch of that loch and they haven't found anything. So, but Bigfoot's still a big one, right? I mean, how many shows? There's also the second two ghost hunting and UFO shows on cable TV are Bigfoot shows. They are everywhere. Now, you could say, okay, what does this have to do with Christianity? Here's the problem. People who really get into this is like a religion. Well, it's like a religion. I mean, it's all they do. Now, if you ever want to have a good time, if you have Netflix, I'm not sure if it's still streaming on Netflix. There's a documentary, how many of you have seen this? Not Your Average Bigfoot movie. How many of you have seen it? Have you met the guy? Because it was shot here in Scioto County. Shot here in Scioto County with two Bigfoot experts. One you recognize automatically because he drives around town in a white van. You see him all the time. Wayne, yeah, name Wayne. And Wayne claims to be the expert Bigfoot caller. That he knows how to do the Bigfoot call to lure them out of the woods, right? And the other guy claims to have seen Bigfoot like 500 times. It's so funny because there's this big climax in the movie where they're talking. They're like, "We've got the #1 expert coming to see us and look over our evidence. He's the #1 expert in the world, and we're going to meet him." And they go meet him at the Etmar. I'm like, wow. That's where they found Bigfoot, yeah. Oh man! If you do though, it's because it's shot here and they go out to Shawnee Forest, all kinds of stuff. You should go watch it. It's pretty funny, but it has become almost a religion. Now let's face it. The odds of any of these creatures existing are poor to none, right? I mean, we would have found one. It's one thing if we said, if it was like Littlefoot and it's like an inch tall and we just can't, they just burrow underground. These things are supposed to be 7 feet tall. They're supposed to be 7 feet tall. They're supposed to stink. They're supposed to make all kinds of noise. And yet we've never found one body. We've never found even droppings that could be unidentified. And it's like, give me a break, I mean, this is just ridiculous. What? Mothman, yeah. No. But if I have time, I'll talk about that too, because I used to live in that area, and it's, oh boy. Have you been to Point Pleasant and seen the Mothman statue? Oh, yeah. It's like that big. I mean, it's not really impressive. It looks like they took a gargoyle off an old house and just put red eyes on it, and then just planted it in the middle of town, Anyway, most of these sightings have proven to be hoaxes, including the most famous film, the Patterson film. Remember this one? This made all kinds of headlines in the late 60s, early 70s, where the guy's riding along this horse and claims to see Bigfoot walking across. People who have analyzed that have now said you can see something, but happens to be a zipper running down his back. You know, something tells me Bigfoot is not zipping up, you know, before he goes out.
Is that Wrangler or Levi?
Yeah. Oh, man. But the problem with this, too, is this has been widely adopted by the New Age movement, this kind of cryptozoology, because they have begun to argue the reason that you can't find these creatures is they're spirit creatures. And what they've done is they begin to incorporate Native American religious practices into this belief. Right? So now you're seeing this, and these things come and go in cycles, this kind of Bigfoot stuff kind of come and go in cycles in popularity. And one of the things that happens now is the New Age movement has kind of grabbed onto it, and they've taken some Native American teachings and tried to turn it into a religion and tried to make these Bigfoot as kind of like demigods. So that's one thing you want to watch out for. These weird stories are fun. Like I said, they're almost always hoaxes or just pure delusions. I mean, I have no doubt they show the poor old woman. They interview this one poor old woman out in Gallipolis because, I don't know if you know, I used to live in Gallipolis because I worked on a congressional campaign there back in '94, and that's the first time I heard the term the grass man. Ohioans have their own term for Bigfoot, the grass man. That's what they call him. And this goes all the way back until someone supposedly was attacked in the 1880s by the grass man, and his daughter saved him by throwing a rock at its head. The thing is, they believe this was Bigfoot. If you read the account, it sounds more like a baboon that got loose from somewhere. And those things are mean, you know. Most of the time, these people are well-meaning people, and they just, you know, they see a bear or they see whatever, and then they go off. Their imaginations get the better of them. What about UFOs? And there are actually UFO cults out there. How many of you remember Heaven's Gate? Remember Heaven's Gate? The people who all had the Nikes and they all committed suicide together. They committed suicide because they believed a comet was going past and the aliens were behind the comet, and if they killed themselves, their spirits would rise up and be aboard the alien spaceship. Right? That was a UFO cult. Yeah, evil Lord Xenu. They want to go see the evil Lord Xenu. Like ghosts and cryptozoology, UFOs, these shows tend to dominate cable TV. And it's actually even invaded science. The belief in the existence of extraterrestrials, those are aliens, has given birth to theories like panspermia. Panspermia is the idea that life, the reason why atheists cannot tell you how life was created on Earth or how the world was created was because aliens did it. Francis Crick, the man who helped discover the double helix of the DNA, believes in panspermia. Richard Dawkins has floated the idea of panspermia as a perfectly acceptable scientific idea. And so this has really gotten out of control. Because here's why. It is actually physically impossible for aliens, even if they exist, to travel to Earth from any known planet. Can't happen. Absolutely, positively cannot happen. First of all, there is no planet in our solar system that could support life except ours. Ours is the only one. If you took my apologetics class, you'll remember this, that ours is the only one. Even if you traveled in a ship, so if you wanted to say you lived in another galaxy, for some reason the odds are against it, that in another galaxy there is a planet that supports life, and they wanted to come to Earth, for what reason I don't know, apparently from UFO books, to pick up farmers in Iowa and anally probe them for some reasons that we have no idea. But if they wanted to do that, they would need a ship with a thermonuclear engine, and even with that, it would take a minimum of 20 years just to get from one galaxy to the next. It would take 20 years. Are you going to tell me you're going to take a 40-year round trip to implant a tracking device in someone's butt? For reasons we have no idea why? This is the dumbest thing I have ever heard of. I mean, it just makes absolutely no sense. And moreover, again, the possibility of any other planet providing all the necessary elements for carbon-based life forms are astronomical. We either God exists or we won the galactic lottery, folks. And not the little one. The 600 million, the 1.5 billion one is the one we won. This is what it would take. These are the odds of what we have here existing on its own. 1 times 10 to the negative 15th, or 1/1000th of 1 trillionth. Those are the odds of randomly just stuff coming together and making a planet that supports life. Just not going to happen. It just isn't going to happen. And none of these beliefs can be squared with Christianity. The Bible is very clear that we are actually very special people, that God created us and sent a Savior to us and made us in the image and likeness of God. And that's it. You say, well, but okay, what about all these different accounts? What about Roswell, New Mexico, and Area 51, and all that other kind of stuff? I used to, when I worked on Capitol Hill, NASA was one of my issues that I had to cover as a legislative aide, and so I got to fly on NASA 1, the jet, and over from Washington, D.C. to Dayton and tour Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Well, if you've ever read any of the UFO stuff, the aliens that crashed in Roswell were supposedly shipped by train to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton. So the first thing I asked is, where are the aliens? Come on, I got some kind of classified, clearance. Where are the aliens? And the guy looked at me and he said, well, I could show you, but then I'd have to kill you, And so the problem with this is you start looking at all these stories they break down. Now, it is very, and this is what somebody misses, is like, well, we saw a crashed ship somewhere near Roswell, New Mexico. If you go to Roswell, New Mexico, and I've been by it. I didn't stop. I've been by it. Roswell, New Mexico has this thing called an Air Force base. And the government has widely acknowledged they test experimental aircraft there. So yeah, a strange-looking ship may have crashed. That doesn't mean they're aliens. That just means some guy jetted out of the thing before it crashed into the side of a mountain, and it happens. Especially in the late 40s and early 50s, right? And they used to be that, they argued that, it's actually early on, they didn't argue they were flying saucers, they said they were triangles. All these pictures were of triangles. They say, see, this is an alien ship, it's a triangle. Then in the 1970s, it becomes declassified that, guess what, all the experimental aircraft we've been working on look like? Triangles. Like, oh, right? And there are all these other kind of things that people freak out about. Like, there is such thing as ball lightning. You ever heard about this? Ball lightning are just literally balls of lightning that look like they're free floating. That happens. These things happen all the time. But most of them are hoaxes. I remember being out in Minford in 1997. Don't ask me why. And I was out in Minford and what's the name of the lake out there? It'll come to me in a second. Anyway, I was standing there, I looked back, and there's this saucer-like object with lights going all around it. Now, it was the cheesiest hoax, attempt at a hoax I'd ever seen, because you could literally see the wires from this thing. And also, I always wondered, if you have a UFO that's a flying saucer, what's the lights about? If you got the technology for a saucer, are you really worried about somebody else bumping into you out in outer space? So you got to have your lights on? I mean, it's just, yeah, I guess. It just doesn't make any sense. It's just all bizarre. But anyway, it's important to remember we believe as Christians in the Trinity and that God created the universe separate from himself, right? It is not the same thing. We believe that God knows all, and that if you want wisdom, we are to pray to him for it. James 1:5, right? Pray to God, he will give it to you. We believe in objective truth and morality which comes from God who is perfect. He says this is moral, this is right, this is true, it's right, it's perfect, it's true. We believe we are to worship our God and him only. I am a jealous God, right? That's the beginning of the 10 Commandments. Martin Luther used to say, if you obey the first commandment, you're going to obey all the rest of them. Because if you worship God as God, you're not going to do all that other kind of stuff. We believe that to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. We're not out there floating around, folks. You either go to heaven or you go to Sheol, right? You don't go to some creepy house on the west side. I mean, that's not going to happen. So all this kind of stuff is very, very important to keep in mind, because you just don't want to start to incorporate these beliefs into your system, okay? If you think your house is haunted, it's not haunted. You just need to pray and fast, and get whatever's in there crap out of there. Because I do believe, I know it makes me sound weird to most outsiders, but yeah, there are demons out there.
Christ Community meets on Saturday at 5 p.m. and Sunday at 10:30 a.m. For more information, visit www.christcommunity.net or check out our Facebook page.